Good evening, everyone. Jesse just got information a few moments ago that Amy is not able to join us this evening. So it's going to be he could have joined the middle of the last forum, but he decided to not throw a monkey wrench into the works. Jesse Smith is candidate, and you are in Ward 2, correct?
Yes, that is
Yay,
correct.
I got it right. It's hard to remember because they don't go in chronological order through the
Right.
city. So we're going to do the same thing that we did with the mayoral forum and the candidate forum earlier, which is give you about 3 minutes to tell people about you and your sitting council member running again. Let us know a little bit about yourself, Jesse.
All right. So my name is Jesse Smith. Many of you know me and hear from me pretty constantly on North Kansas City Neighbors. I am from Georgia. I grew up near Savannah. I have a degree in finance from the University of Georgia, and I am on the finance committee at my church, Church of Resurrection, managing a $25 million budget. I currently work in real estate as an investor and an agent. I live in Northgate Village with my wife, Brooke, my daughter, Ella, who is almost 2. And I moved here in 2013, intending to hate living in the Midwest. I read about the snow and the wild weather swings and just didn't know what I was going to do with all that. So here we are 8 years later, and I love it. I'm all in here in North Kansas City. And I do plan to be here a very long time. So want to make this place the best possible place to live. And so that's why I joined the city council. I want to be able to help my family, my friends, my neighbors, the businesses, everyone around here. And I want to be in this next term, hopefully, to build on some of the great things we did, at least in the first year I was on council. The second year was 2020, kind of the lost year. So coming out of the pandemic, I think we're going to have a lot of great things going on. A lot of projects were on hold. So that's a little bit about me, and I am just looking forward to getting into it.
All right. So, just for clarification, we're going to do the same questions that we asked in the 7 o'clock forum, and Jesse will have an opportunity to do his individual interview just like everybody else next week, even though this is technically one on one as well. So, Jesse, without further ado, how do you plan to get residents involved in decision making?
Okay, so this is a great question. It's been a touchy topic recently around town. So a couple things about me. When I first got on council, I prioritized the communication aspect. I started a newsletter slash council review email that I sent out to everybody in my ward who was brave enough to give me an email address. So that covers a couple hundred people, I think. I haven't counted recently. So that goes out after every council meeting. Sometimes it takes a few days. Also, for my friends who live at the Gardens apartments who don't, they don't, some of them don't have a computer, some don't use email or social media, and some do, which I'm friends with so many of them, and it's wonderful. I would actually go down and do potluck dinners with them. So I would sit down and we'd break bread together and talk about what was bothering them and what they liked and, get their input on stuff. And then, of course, I am overly engaged on North Kansas City Neighbors Facebook page, sometimes to a degree that's way too much. But I want to get involved. I want to be out there talking to people. So one of the things that getting residents involved in decision making process, I feel like there's a continuum, right? So there's one end where we could put everything out to a public referendum and every single voice who wanted to be heard would be heard. That's really not a realistic situation. And then on the other end, you have, a rule with an iron fist. We make all the decision. We don't want to hear anything from you. But sitting in the middle of that is what we have here in North Kansas City. It's a representative democracy. You all elect us because we most closely share your views. Or in Adam Roberts' case, he's the only one running, but he's a great guy. So then we make decisions based on the information that we're given in our council agendas, in our briefings, and our discussions with residents and local business owners. We get a lot of information to digest. I shared the agenda on North Kansas City Neighbors, hundreds of pages of attachments, which I go through every time. And so we make those decisions, but we also want your input, but you have to reach out. You have to engage with the process, right? So I put out opportunities on social media to engage. Anytime somebody sends me an email, I respond to it. Anytime somebody gives me a call, I get calls from people all over the city. I'm always happy to take some time and respond. But people really need to speak up to be heard. Please don't wait until after a decision's been made and then let us know what you didn't like. Talk to us ahead of time. And my email box is always open. I'm on Facebook most of the time, and my cell phone number is out there. So use it.
Thank you. Kind of have a little bit of an advantage because you're already a sitting council member, so you know the inner workings. So, what do you consider the priorities for North Kansas City? And the second part of that is, where do you see us in 20 years?
Sure. So 20 years is a long time to think about, but it's exciting because I want to be here for the next 20 plus years. So when I start thinking about what will the city look like, I really am excited about where we're going with the complete streets, the bike master plan, getting people out, walking, biking, engaging with the city. So I'm thinking things like walkability, more bike lanes that tie in through the industrial area, go under I-35 and tie into that side, and even possibly a bike trail on the levees. The discussions are starting to happen for that. Then I want to talk about improving the look and feel of our downtown area. We've got some weathered pavers, we've got some trees that aren't in such great shape, and there was actually a plan in place in process before the pandemic hit to get all that refreshed. So that I think you're going to see a lot of that coming in the next little bit. It's going to be beautiful. And then as that starts to transform, I want to see it move down Armour Road. So some of the concern I hear of complete streets is why did we push, out down Armour Road where there's nothing? There's a dead quick trip spot. What I think you're going to see over the next, few years, and it's hopefully in 20, is that's going to just downtown is going to extend almost all the way to the interstate, and it's going to be wonderful. I also like to see North Kansas City become more of a destination. I say more because we are a bit of a destination already. We have places like Dag Park. We've got the Rabbit Hole coming in. I don't know if you've heard of Chicken and Pickle, but it's kind of a big deal. So we've got places that people want to come to, but I think we can keep that going. We can keep building on it. And we really can take advantage of our position in the metro area. We're very, very well situated in the metro. In addition to that, I want to see more family options. I mentioned the Rabbit Hole, Dag Park, ROKC for climbing. I'd like to help with private sector engagement for bringing in more family-friendly businesses. So if we get those proposals, I want to put those at the top of the list as to what we're considering. I think that would be just wonderful to have more family options with my, 2-year-old wanting to get out and do things. I'd like to be able to walk places. I want to see renovations continue on existing housing stock. I walk the neighborhood all the time and I see what's happening with people taking, new paint jobs on their house, building porches, just refreshing the neighborhood as it goes. So there's a lot of good momentum there, particularly in Ward 3, some in Ward 1 starting to happen. So you're going to see a lot of that renewal of the existing housing stock. And then I'd like to see some more intentional developments, kind of like what the city did with Northgate Village, where it was a planned unit development, and it has single family housing, it has multifamily housing, it has senior living, it has it had planned for some retail and commercial, still in the works. There's going to be an RFP going out for that sometime soon. So I'd like to see some more of that happening as our industrial area starts to age, some of those warehouses become less useful, and then we see some turnover in that kind of real estate.
Okay. Um, Great answers. Lots of information there. The You kind of hit on the complete streets plan and your position on it. Just maybe a minute or so, can you expound on why you support the complete streets plan?
Sure. So I came onto the council. I came on after it was all finished, but I did have one vote. I got the final green light vote to approve the contractor to start tearing out the pavement. So I do have a hand in what we see there just a little bit. But I have been a big defender of what's going on there all along. So if you recall the 3-hour council meeting, I was freshly on, and we had a big showdown at City Hall with a lot of emotions. And there was an effort to tear out the street right then and there before it had even been finished. Pavement wasn't quite dry. And I asked, could we put the brakes on it? And I think that's been a really good thing because we got a chance to feel it out. We've had a chance to get feedback and learn what works, what doesn't, what are we changing, and then we put out a community survey. I took that survey, hundreds of comments, pages after pages, distilled it down to a list of 7 things that I brought to the council meeting, and those 7 things are being implemented. We did studies, we looked at what it costs, and we're putting those in motion. So you're going to see the delineators go away. It's going to be a lot better looking. Looking ahead for Complete Streets, we're looking at connecting the whole city. So not just this 3-block stretch of Armour Road that people have had a lot of emotional engagement with. We're looking at moving bike lanes all over the city. We're looking at bringing pedestrian access. And when people talk about the drive time taking a longer, a little bit longer to get down Armour, that's a feature. That's not a bug. It was intended to slow cars down, to bring people into downtown with their cars, with their bikes, with their feet. So it's not, we're okay with traffic being slower. And if you want to take an alternate route, take an alternate route. If you're using North Kansas City as a thoroughfare, you can go down 14th or 16th or, but this is our main street. This is where we really want to focus. So I'm a big fan of the Complete Streets, and I think it's a big catalyst for small businesses located along Armour Road. I think, Mindy, you have a business there. You get to see some foot traffic going by. I've walked by, peeked in the window, seeing what you guys are up to. Stopping in at Cultivar now, I call it Colony, and have a cup of coffee just because I'm walking down the street. Maybe I wouldn't have if I was driving by. So I really, really like where we're going with this.
So, what is your opinion on light rail streetcar expansion into North Kansas City?
So the light rail and streetcar is a very interesting conversation. I admittedly not a big fan when the streetcar went into downtown Kansas City, partially because I used to live in Charlotte and we had a light rail system that I really, really enjoyed. Light rail and streetcar being just very different modes of transportation. So streetcar obeys all the traffic laws and regulations, stops at all the lights. Light rail just whips on through. It's like kind of like a subway except above ground. So I'm a big fan of light rail. A streetcar is a different discussion. I think it would be beneficial bringing streetcar into North Kansas City. I like what it can bring as far as access to River Market. We really need to look at what it's going to cost, how we're going to pay for it, whether it's through tax dollars in North Kansas City on the businesses, on the residents, if we're going to be able to get federal grants brought in, and how it ties in with our Burlington Corridor project. But I do think it's going to be a net positive. I wish it was a light rail. There's some discussion about, can it go from streetcar to light rail and ride on a track where it won't stop at every light? That would be fantastic, and that is a possibility. I don't know what the cost is. I don't know what the numbers look like for that, but we have just approved an exploratory committee. Council members DeLong and Toll are going to be on that. So it's got a lot of positive momentum, and I like what it could do for Northtown. I just want to make sure the numbers line up.
Gosh, part of me, I'm trying to remain impartial, and yet it's the two of us having a conversation. So, uh, moving it to another person to answer the question, I don't get that pleasure, but I also want you to have some feedback. You
Sure.
know, as far as the benefits to North Kansas City utilizing that Burlington corridor, and it's my understanding that they already have plans in there for where it could go if it were to be implemented. So,
Yes,
um,
that's
for
part of the corridor.
for people that are in support of it, they're they're what they're doing with the Burlington corridor plans is really thinking of those unintended consequences and future options very clearly. So that's good news.
And
So
to throw in one more on that,
sure.
Mindy, is people have looked at Armour and said we don't want to lose a lane on Burlington, and just to ease people's fears, there's not going to be a lost lane on Burlington. It will be 3 in either direction, with, in the renderings I'm seeing now, space in the median to put a streetcar or a light rail or whatever turns out being. The pedestrian and bike access will be along let me say this right, the east side corridor on the side with Chicken and Pickle in the city itself. So that's how it would lay out. I really encourage you to take a look at the renderings.
And as a sidebar, my husband works for the ATA, and the current streetcars do have the ability to go up to about 55 miles an hour. So, just FYI. Um, so one of the questions earlier that we kind of tied into a question that was done in the polls was, um, what is your position on more recreation areas for families and family friendly attractions and activities? We kind of did hone in a little bit that some things have fees attached and some things don't have fees attached, and for families, we kind of need that blend. So, what is your position on things like volleyball courts and the outdoor pool, skate park, ice rink, inclusive playgrounds, and other family friendly activities?
So I love outdoor family friendly activities. I would embrace any potential idea that comes forward. I want to first, because my background is in finance, I want to make sure that the dollars and cents work. And as Rita mentioned in the last meeting, this is largely going to be, most of this is going to be Parks and Rec decision for final yes or no. The city council and the parks department, I would encourage people to learn about that dynamic. I'm still learning about it myself. But we can allocate some funds to them, and then they make the decision on the project. A couple things. So there was talk of an accessible playground. Very early on in my first year with city council, I sat down with former director Kelly Vitipka and asked about the park, the playground on Howell. It's outdated. A big tree got cut down, so it's almost entirely in the sun all afternoon. And so she told me at the time there was consideration for adding in a whole new set of play structures, accessible play, a new shade structure, and then COVID hit, right? So it was in the plans for 2020, and I hope I'm gonna work on following up to make sure that that gets brought back into the discussion if it's not already there with the Parks Board. Another one that I kind of alluded to is a background discussion with some stakeholders in the city for levee trails, bikes at the riverfront, possibly on the levees. There's a lot that goes into this. It's not as simple as snap a finger and we get some bike trails on the levee. It's so many moving parts, right? And there's going to be a lot of people in those discussions. So I don't want to say it's going to happen. I say it's something that I would love to see happen. Other things like swimming pools, skate parks, those are very interesting. Where we find the space, how it gets paid for, those are going to be bigger discussions. But I think a skate park sounds like a lot of fun. I would probably break my hip very quickly because I'm an old man now. But I think it's a culture fit for Northtown. So we'll see where that lands. And then, also private businesses. So when a private business like the Rabbit Hole comes in and wants to do something family friendly, I want to encourage that in any way we possibly can. I want to work with them, partner between the public and private to make sure that we get the best quality private industry bringing in family stuff as well.
Excellent. So those are really the questions that we talked about on the first stream. Or is there anything you're remembering that I'm not?
No, I think that was the bulk of it.
We whipped right through them.
Yeah.
So, what is it that you would want people to know about you as a sitting council person that they're considering voting for again in this election? That you feel is important for them to know about you, because obviously we didn't do this when you ran before,
Right.
and so there's a lot of people in town that still don't know you and know much about you. So I'll give you 3 or 4 minutes to kind of tell people what you want them to know, and then we'll get more in depth in the interview next week.
Sure. As a kind of a wrap up, I have been on the council for 2 years now. During the pandemic, I really feel like became a leading voice in the city as far as what we were pushing for with safety measures, really keeping an eye on what was going on there, and collaborating with other council members, ones I agree with, ones I haven't, to make sure that we're doing that. Over the past year, we've done the best we could to keep our residents safe. In addition to that, I feel like as I came onto the council, I've raised the standard for preparation for meetings. I came in at a time when there were a few people who were really putting in the work. But as I've watched the council evolve during the last couple of years, it really seems like most people are taking the time to research and come prepared, ask good questions. So I want to see that continue. I really do. So whoever gets voted on, whoever gets elected, I think we're going to hopefully continue that. And you know, in that vein, I debated on what to say. I do want you to vote. I want you to get out there and be informed whether you're in my ward or not. And I really want you to watch what the candidates are saying. I want you to listen to everything they're saying and how they're saying it. And you know, if they're bringing solutions, if they're bringing actual thoughtful solutions to the process, if they seem to understand how the process works, because you know, as a candidate, people can promise you the sky. They can tell you that they're going to bring this and that and the other, but you know there are constraints to the process. There are things that we have to work through, systems that exist. So listen to what people are saying, whether they're bringing realistic ideas and whether they're being thoughtful, if they're just kind of throwing out whatever crosses their mind. And then I would just encourage you there, whether your candidate is running unopposed, like in Ward 3, or whether you've got 4 candidates in the race, get out and vote, because we all have to vote on the mayoral race. And I think we've got a couple really strong candidates there. So I look forward to doing the more in-depth interview. And if anybody has questions on Facebook, I think we've got 11 people watching. Does anybody have something to ask? I've got another couple minutes, I guess.
I've not seen any questions. A comment about support of the levee trail and understanding that the levees involves the Army Corps of Engineers and making sure that the levees are not harmed by put. We had the same discussion when we lived in Smithville because there was lots of use of the levees around the reservoir for
Yep.
the lake, and there's just some things. It's more detailed than yeah, there's space. Let's put them in. Let's go for it. Um,
Right.
there's more to consider for the safety of North Kansas City because what we don't want, and you're a real estate agent, you know that there's parts of North Kansas City that's considered flood zone and parts that aren't, depending on your elevation, and those
Right.
levees are really part of why that exists.
The levees are why North Kansas City exists at all,
Yes.
because if not, we would have flooded almost every year over the last 5 or 6, detrimentally. So the integrity of the levees are, that's, I see people in the chat very excited about that. Don't get too excited right now. It's very early, but the integrity of the levees is primary. We have to make sure those are good. So you're right. Army Corps, there's Burns and Mac are involved, and then there's the levee district, who are the largest stakeholders. They have the most to lose if something goes wrong with the levee. And then there's safety concerns with the levees themselves. They're pretty tall. And how do we protect people who are riding or walking or biking on those? So it's a lot to consider. But I'm excited about the possibilities of getting something out there where people can go and you know be in nature and still be in North Kansas City.
Amen to that. We, even when we lived in Smithville, we were down here bicycling with our 5 kids all the time because it's flat. Because I'm not doing
Yeah,
hills. My husband would do hills all day long, not me.
not doing
Um,
hills.
no, the airport, downtown North Kansas City, all the way down to the rail yards. That's where we went.
Right.
So that's really the biggest comment that came in. No real questions. Just
Okay.
people in support. If you have any last minute questions, go ahead and do it right now. Otherwise, we're going to start wrapping up. As Jesse was saying, this is the most important election is the general municipal election. Unfortunately, it is also the least attended. People don't realize just how important our city leadership is to our everyday lives. And what we found with COVID 19 is that very thing. Who we had in our leadership, because we're a small town, we don't have 500,000 people to choose from for a mayor or city council person. So who we choose, we have to be really, really smart about who we choose because they're making huge decisions. When we canceled Snake Saturday Parade and it came down to our city administrator and city council having input in that, when we started talking about COVID and what our processes were going to be for that, we started to understand very differently than we ever had before about what our local city and county governments responsibilities are to the residents of the cities and counties, but also what impact they have on our day-to-day lives.
100%. Yeah, it's vitally important. This people get bent out of shape over national elections, but this is the stuff that really does impact you on a day-to-day basis.
We do have one last question that I'll put to the table. We did not get to ask this of the last group. Simply, we ran out of time. How do you propose to bring together the factions of different opinions and come together to an agreement or a compromise to and working together? How do you propose to do that?
Sure, that's a good question. That's something that's almost vital to being in leadership. There's 8 of us plus the mayor, and we got to get on the same page. Sometimes we're not all on the same page, and a meeting, I guess it was 2 meetings back, is a prime example of that. We had a couple split votes, and I happened to be on one side of one and the other side of the other, voting with different groups. So I really dig deep into the material we're provided. We get information from experts. We have a city financial expert, Matt Webster. We have very capable staff who prepare great reports for us. And then I go out and I talk to my neighbors. I've got my email list. People will respond to that. So I'm gathering as much feedback as I possibly can. And then ultimately, I have to have an opinion on something that's formed out of all of that. So with the 2 meetings back, I voted to approve the 18th and Swift apartment final agreement where we had a 3-way land swap. That went 4-4 and the mayor broke the tie. And then 2 items later, we had a vote that I forget the exact topic. It involved Armour Road, and that was split just the same. I believe that went 5-3 maybe, and I was with the group who had voted against the 18th and Swift project. So I can find common ground with both sides of any issue. So that's how I bring them together.
Great answer. Great examples. For those that are watching, this is a hard concept for people to understand. Conflict is actually good. Conflict that comes to resolutions, conflict that keeps people fighting against each other, that's not good. But through conflict, through differences of opinion, we can prevent egregious errors from being made. We start to hear both sides of opinions and positions and people's different levels of research. So I be cautious. Conflict isn't always a bad thing.
Right. And, with, for an example, Councilmember Saper and I have disagreed pretty blatantly on most development related issues. But if I look and say, he wants the same thing I do, what's best for North Kansas City, if I look at him through that lens, everything he's doing is for that. He just sees it a little bit differently, and that's okay. It's okay to see different paths to the same sort of conclusion. And, I like hearing about those things. Sometimes my mind has changed, and that's okay. So that's why I like working with a council that doesn't always agree on things.
Amen to that. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for allowing us to expand a little bit more than we were able to with the previous group, just simply because we're 1-on-1, and we do want it to be interesting for those that are viewing and have them be able to get to know the candidates. Jesse, I'm going to sign off with a request of our viewers, but if you'll hang around for just a second, that'd be great. Vote on April 6th. Your time to register to vote has passed if you have not registered to vote, but be sure to go ahead and register to vote anyway so you can in the next election. If you have registered to vote, please make plans to vote. You can still get your absentee ballot as of this point. I want to say it's middle of next week when you won't be able to get those anymore. But please vote in the general municipal election. It is important to our city and to our livelihoods, to the businesses that are here, as well as to us as residents who enjoy living in North Kansas City. So please get out and vote on April 6th, and watch the Facebook page for information on the individual interviews next week. Thank you all, and have a good night.